8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Good evening, I'm Stevenson Manners, your host of Your Voice with the NRP, a program aired every Monday here at Vaughan Radio, 8:30 to 10. And of course, it is Monday, March 28th, which means it's the final Monday in what should have been the merry month of March. I'm unhappy rather, that it's coming to an end. In this month of March, we've seen some dramatic presentations from the leadership of our federal government. Absolutely, they would qualify for an Oscar at last night's Academy. So dramatic it has been. I'm not sure that all of it has been in the interest of the people they're supposed to serve. Some appears very self-serving. So we're happy that it's at an end or near the end. So tonight, we're going to discuss many issues, and with me is the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, Nevis's oldest and most transformative party. She brings no swagger. She has a cool demeanor, Janice Kears, and she's our special guest tonight on Your Voice with the NRP. We'll take a break, and then we'll be right back. And of course, it's a two-way street. Your calls invited, 469-1616, 469-1700.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
We're back. So Dr. Daniel Hodge, what should have been a merry month of March turned out to be a very dramatic one. There were many virtual slaps across the face of each other, the members of the Unity administration. I dare say they brought us almost to the brink of a constitutional crisis. But you look as cool as ever, and I know that you'll be able to make some sense of it and bring some calm to our country, some sober leadership. Good night and welcome.
Good night, Mr. Manners. Thank you for having me this evening. Good night to all who are listening. And I dare say it has been quite a while since we would have expressed condolences to a number of families, but just this past week I would have attended the funeral of the Tysons and the Farrells, and I just want to say I know that these times are never easy, and it's a constant concern to have to experience the loss of loved ones, and so there are many persons who are suffering losses right now, and I would like to extend condolences. I know we would have heard of the passing of Miss Swanston, and I gather that funeral is going to be
Thursday the 6th.
Is it Thursday the 6th?
Uh-huh,
so that is coming up. And so, like I said, we must take time out to acknowledge that people are suffering. People are going through some really depressed times, and whatever we can do to try to uplift and to help each other along the way, then that is definitely what we have to do. So notwithstanding the all of the excitement, as you may consider it, we recognize that we're living in very fluid times. Times are very uncertain. It's very difficult to predict what will happen tomorrow. And so we must be able to be flexible. We must be able to adjust to the changing environment around us. And sometimes it's not so much the issue at hand, but it's rather how we choose to deal with a particular issue. And I must say that we have seen quite a bit of flurry now, and the question must be asked, why at this particular time? Now, we all know that there was an election quite imminent in Nevis, and everybody was going along preparing for that election. All of a sudden, we hear that a drowning man catches a sinking
straw.
At a straw.
Mm-hmm.
And so while there is much to do about the Charleston Accord and what it would have provided for, the question must be asked, why at this particular time? And as some people like to say, even a blind man can see directly what the situation is. And we would have looked at and tried to understand what was the genesis of this sudden expression of deep concern for the people of Nevis and why we're not getting our fair share. And when you actually look at the matter, you can only come to the conclusion that it's another political ploy. We have seen where our premier will have drafted budgets for the NIA and gone into the House of Assembly, the Nevis Island Assembly, and approved the budget based on his understanding of the arrangement with the Team Unity government, which is $45 million per year from the CBI proceeds. We would have seen him move over 2 thinkets in the federal cabinet and in the parliament there, and approved the federal budget, which had the $45 million. And so my position is, had I been in his position, I think those were 2 critical times when the alarm should have been sounded. I am not going to pass an NIA budget because it does not reflect Nevis's fair share.
Federal budget.
Well, the Nevis budget, he would not approve it with the $45 million. And so if you needed to force the Prime Minister's hand, then you do your calculation, because you're saying it's not the fair share. But who is doing the calculation? We understand that the Prime Minister now is going to get independent consultants to come in and look at it. But for so long we've been talking about fair share. You'd have campaigned on it. So what did our Premier do in order to advance that position? And so not only did he prepare and approve an NIA budget based on $45 million, he went to Sinkit and approved the federal budget with the same $45 million. And so how can you approve the budget in December and now in March you're coming and speaking to the people, to the masses, and saying, oh, the Prime Minister is not giving me fair share?
Not in March, in January.
Well, he started in January, but he would have made a big proclamation on the PAMS
convention.
At the PAMS convention. And so, as we say, why at this particular time, when you could have refused to sign off or accept the federal budget if you know at that time it did not have the fair share? And so we say it must be, because we're now very close to an election, on the eve of an election, and so you want to now pull at the heartstrings of people, the people of Nevis, and say, I am here to represent you, and I will ensure that we get our fair share. What did you do from 2015 until 2022? What was done? What legislation was drafted? And one of the big concern, and Dr. Bartlett mentioned it when she was here the last time, we have got to get to the point where we are not at the mercies of the federal government. What legislation was drafted consistent with the Constitution? I mean, he is so good at drafting legislation for so many different things that would, benefit his personal interest. But in terms of regularizing the financial arrangement between the federal government and the NIA, what did he do? And that is a question that we have been asking all along. You did not do anything, and now because an election is pending, you're getting up and you're making all this noise. Oh, I couldn't do it. I'm not getting the fair share. It's the Prime Minister's fault. And I realize that a number of persons in St. seem to have some reason to try to support his claim. And the question must be asked, why at this particular point in time? Now, I have some concerns with regards to what the Premier has done with regards to the Charlestown Accord, and why he feels that he should be given another chance to try to represent the people of Nevis once again. It is clear to us that he would have failed in his mandate, and he is now at this time trying to rally support to say, it's not my fault. My hands were tied. It is the Prime Minister's fault. But I guess too little too late. Too little too late. The writing is on the wall. You were given a specific mandate, and you failed to deliver on that mandate. And so that is how I look at the entire situation. I would have listened to the various speeches at the conventions, and we in the NRP, we have taken a position that whoever occupies the seat of Prime Minister, we must forge a cordial and working relationship. We cannot, on one hand, ask the people of St. Kitts to stay out of Nevis's politics, and on the other hand, we are reaching out for our fair share. It does not work that way. And when we are in a situation where monies are being provided, there is no accountability, questions must be asked. And so, as it is, certain persons have taken to the airwaves and have tried to suggest that the NRP is aligned with PLP, or that the PLP is trying to disengage itself from CCM and align with the NRP. And I think very early, very early, I would have indicated as leader of the NRP that the local election addresses the concerns of Nevis. I am interested in representing the people of Nevis, and so there is no reason at this time for the NRP to be aligned with any political party. NRP would have been aligned with Labour before. NRP would have been aligned with PAM. Most recently, though, this unity construct, it is quite interesting that without looking at the mutual interest of the individual parties, that you could align prior to an election. We would have said basically that the Charlestown Accord, it was prepared for political expediency. It was not prepared in order for the three parties to work together. Because as you look through the Accord and you see all of the provisions that have been neglected up to this point in time, the question must be asked, if this was really drafted to help to better the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis, to help to ensure that Nevis gets its fair share of proceeds and grants, etc. A number of provisions in the Charlestown Accord that have been neglected. And I can say that boldly, because when we speak not just about the CBI proceeds, but it also speaks to grants and other revenues. And I have not heard one day St. Kitts has a $70 million solar facility that is being implemented. A portion of the funding for that project would have come from grant funding. Well, if the overall cost of the project is $70 million, and a portion of it is from the grant funding. Where was the concern that Nevis needs solar facility as well? Where is Nevis's share of that particular grant? And, I would have spoken about the ship registry. That is documented as, very lucrative source of funding. And there is no mention about these things. So it seems to me that the CBI is very easy to call CBI, and there's no real interest in ensuring that the people of Nevis receive the equitable share of the resources. It was quite interesting to listen to the Prime Minister when he spoke about Section 110 of the Constitution, and with regards to the pro rata share, is that based on just the federal revenues, or is it based on pooled revenues between St. Kitts and Nevis? We know a while back, when Nevis was in a much better economic position, whatever the discussions and arrangements were made, Nevis stopped contributing to the consolidated fund. And so for our Premier now to be saying that you're looking at the amount of the CBI proceeds and we're not getting our fair share, without looking at the entire scenario and what surrounds it. People usually say there are two sides or three sides to a story, and when you can present one side and feel that your hands are tied because no one is helping you, the whole relationship is questionable as to how the Premier in his self would be the one to approve the amount. I know it was stated that the former premiers would have requested, but it brings into question the integrity of the operations of the government. And so let's assume, because we know there are a lot of things that happen and we're not privy to what happens. So let's assume that the Prime Minister did not push back and said, well, okay, I'll give you the 61 million. Again, we have the issue of accountability, because having received 400 million thus far, the best relationship ever, no one can point to any completed project, and no one can, well, I certainly tried to do the math based on how much was for the incompleted monotrack, how much was for the various developments, and it's not 400 million. Now 400 million, we understand it covers the STEP and the PAP and the peace program, and so those are salaries being paid. It covers the civil servants. So essentially not providing any revenue generation opportunities in Nevis makes us entirely dependent on the CBI proceeds. And having failed to demonstrate proper, fiduciary responsibility, then this is where I guess, the pushback came in, and those are the concerns that we have to deal with at this time. Interestingly, having said that the CCM government would have received $400 million, it was presented as a lack of scale or lack of competency of the NRP government, when it was stated that CCM would have received all these funds from the CBI money, but NRP did not receive any. NRP got a loan. And I think when people really understand what the NRP stands for with regards to the principles of independence and integrity and self-determination, etc., you could see quite easily where a premier that has the best interests of Nevis at heart would do what is required in the best interest of the people. And so, having not received $400 million from support from the federal government, and NRP was able to do so much in Nevis. When you look around Nevis, you can see NRP's footprint all over. And here we have a CCM government who would have received $400 million, and you cannot see one completed project. And so the question must be asked, where is the money?
Where the money?
Where the money? As a good colleague of mine said, where the money gone? Right?
The money not there. The money not there.
The money not there. The people of Nevis are still struggling, and people would say that, it's not as bad as NRP wants to make it sound bad. And I can remember having a conversation with someone and talking about the struggles of, as we would say, the ordinary people like you and I. And people tell me, oh no, people are not struggling, people are making it up. But I can tell you, just this past week, 2 persons reached out to me. And they reached out to me not because they wanted to, but they just really had no other option, no other choice. They just did not know how they were going to make it to the next day. And so I am on the ground, and I am in touch with the people, and I'm hearing the struggles and the concerns. I mean, I was not aware about, for example, the school lunch program, and families here having to provide monies for school lunch. And so when we look at the fact that $400 million would have been invested in Nevis, the people on the ground, you're not seeing where the social programs were put in place to try to elevate the standard of living for the people. And so where is the money? I mean, we know we have some roads, but even the Island Main Road has some issues as well.
It's deteriorating.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of accountability, and had the Premier really had the best interests of the people of Nevis, and had he have that desire to elevate the people of Nevis out of this position of having to be at the mercy of the PM and regularize the financial arrangement between the federal government and the NIA, we would not be in this position right now. And so it almost seems as if this was orchestrated to
academy style.
Orchestrated so that at this particular point there could be a big song and dance that we're not getting our fair share, and people are going to say, well, maybe the Premier is the person who's going to get us out of this, because he can talk the nice long sentences, the fancy words, and what he's going to do. But he said that before, and he has not delivered. And people are now realizing that the fancy suits and the fancy words do not equate to any improvement in their standard of living. And so I guess this attempt now to destabilize the federal government, because from what I am seeing, he's at the center of it, and it just seems that his approach overall to divide and conquer is at play again here. And so you have the federal government with 3 parties, and now you have the division between the 2 Syncets ministers, and he's at the center of it, simply because he did not put the best interests of the people of Nevis at the forefront of his decision making, and now his aim is to get elected again. And so he finds the best way that he thinks he can do this is to maybe have the deputy prime minister say, oh yes, this we were trying to do this, but I mean, I think people are really seeing through it. And had he used that $400 million in a meaningful way, that the people of Nevis can say, well, yes, we felt the change, we felt the money's coming in, and our lives are improved, then maybe he could have, stated a case. But it was my father, Simon Daniel, who said, if development in the country only benefits a tiny few, then it's no development at all. And that is what we're seeing here. A tiny few you would see benefiting. We have, some people say overnight millionaires here in Nevis. But the masses are really not seeing where $400 million would have been provided to Nevis. And so I think that is really where the issue is. And there's really no explanation at this time. And we really have to pay attention and understand what's going on. But I think from talking to people, I'm getting the feeling that they've realized that he has tried this one time too many, and it's not going to work for him this time. And so as we look at all that is going on, I am hoping that all of the uncertainty surrounding the government can be brought back to a sense of normalcy, because there are a number of issues that must be dealt with, regional and a global level. And with this state of affairs that we have right now, it definitely cannot be in the best interest of the country. And so I do hope that once people recognize that this is really a political ploy, and that I would have mentioned sometime prior, when you have partnerships, your focus should be to try to collaborate as much as you can and negotiate and make compromises if you need to. I think our Premier, his modus operandi is to divide and frustrate. And we've seen that across all walks of his leadership. And we've seen it with the non-nationals, the way that he tried to divide. And anything that is mentioned, he finds a way to create a negative energy as opposed to trying to unite. And I've seen the Guyanese nationals here trying their best to live a very united and integrated lifestyle with the people of Nevis. But every opportunity that our Premier gets, he tries to divide and separate. And I think people recognize that is not the way that we want to live. You don't want to have one group of people feeling, unwelcome and that sort of thing. But that is just basically the way that the Premier operates. It is not good for Nevis. It is not good for our federal relations. And the people must recognize that that is not the way that we would want to go forward.
Now, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of his pet phrases is diplomacy matters. Apparently, on the local front, to use his own word, cataflam matters. And so we are where we are. And I think tomorrow is his press conference. I could picture that. First thing off the bat will be the hospital project is moving apace. He will tell you how many persons passed through the Malcolm Gishard Park and that they had a lovely function there on Sunday night. And it was a lovely function indeed. Then he will tell you that children are really enjoying the incomplete Mundo track and that the mini Olympics is going to be very great, and we know that. Expect a lot of flash and pump tomorrow. But I'm going to give a little bit of advice to the young journalists who are going to be there. You're going to be representing the country, and the country at this point in time needs answers. These are serious times, and it requires serious people. Your first question should cut to the chase. Dr. Daniel Hodge spoke about it. This election is about accountability. It is about accountability. 400 million. And I know that when your colleague, Dr. Bartlett, raised that on the Let's Talk program, he called in and said he don't normally do that. He has his show. And he tried to account, and he could only get to about 100 and something million. And then Dr. Bartlett continued it right here on Your Voice with the NRP. The nation and the journalist must call for accountability. Now, I know that you're on record, the NRP is on record, of being in support of fair share. You issued a statement. We'll get to that in a moment. But accountability must be at the heart of our democracy. So, young journalists, that's your first question tomorrow. But Dr. Bartlett put him on the spot, and he has been put on the spot constantly. He must come tomorrow with answers about that 400 million and how it has been spent on Nevis. It cuts to the core.
Well, you know, we speak of the 400 million, and we heard the Prime Minister give a general overview of the various programs that he would support on Nevis that would, you know, tally up to the 400 million. But when we speak of accountability, when you look at the role of your leader, one must ask the question. Just recently, and I speak about energy a lot because that's really one of the issues, one of the factors that is crippling our development here, the high cost of business. And I mentioned the solar facility that is being developed in St. Kitts. Public-private partnership, arrangement was made using government lands, etc. And so no cost to the people of St. Kitts, no direct cost. But there is hope that the electricity bills are going to be reduced. Now, when we speak about accountability, having received $400 million, the people have not felt that kind of money anywhere in their living. But we would commission a diesel power generator, and then the caution to the people of Nevis is that we took a loan. We took a loan from the Republic Bank to buy this generator, so make sure you pay your utility bills. Now, with $400 million, still no sight of cost of living being reduced, and there must be something wrong somewhere that the CCM government does not see that what they are doing really is building the dependency on external sources, which we have no control over. And so where is the hope that the people of Nevis can have that in 5 or 10 years our cost of doing business, our cost of living is going to be reduced because we are investing in the right sectors and at this point in time? St. Kitts and Nevis has a renewable energy policy, and our we determine what contributions we make to climate change, etc. And so you set out that by 2030 we would want to be able to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, and you can see where the federal government is moving towards that on St. Kitts. We have not done anything on Nevis with regards to minimizing our dependency on external sources and providing a brighter future for the youths and for the businesses. And so these are the types of issues that really make you wonder the basis for decision making in the CCM government. It certainly cannot be to help living conditions of people. It certainly cannot be to be in accordance with global standards and policies, etc. And one of the things I said a while back is that we in the NRP understand where we fit into the global picture. We understand where you will have financing opportunities. And whereas in Sinkis you can get grant funding for a solar facility to reduce the cost of electricity for the people in Sinkis, CCM government over here decides to take a loan because nobody's going to give you a grant to buy a diesel generator in 2021. And so had they taken a moment to say, well, this is our overall objective, to try to improve the cost of living, to try to make life a bit easier, then they would not make those types of decisions. And so here, on top of the 400 million, but we have these various loans and overdrafts at the various banks to deal with. And so, it's not that I'm well, you listen to the Prime Minister speak, and he talk about the debts that he was able to reduce and these sort of things. But we're getting $400 million and our debts are not decreasing. And so, like my good friend says, where the money gone? Where the money gone? You're not reducing debts. You're still taking out loans. You're not impacting. You're not touching the lives of people, everyday people. But now you want to come and disrupt the democratic principles upon which we operate, and say that it's the Prime Minister's fault. But I think it's his fault to have not negotiated and sit down, and before he put the budget together, sit down and work this out in cabinet. I think it squarely falls on his shoulders. And you must understand that if you're in a partnership, we cannot get a proper public-private partnership to advance geothermal. It's a public-private partnership that advances solar facility in Sinkers. And so if this Premier is not able to negotiate for the benefit of the people of Nevis, then he ought not have the position of being Premier.
To use his own slang, should go sit down. Now, the Prime Minister on Saturday, let's face it, the first 60, 65, 75% of his presentation was part entertainment, part rallying the troops. But he got down to brass tacks in the last part of his presentation, and he gave Premier Brantley a history lesson. He said that we're together, Sinkets, Nevis and Willa, in the first instance since 1882. By my mathematics, 140 years. Forget a great portion of that, because the blame lay squarely with the British. They did it for convenience. Fast forward to 1983, 1980, in a coalition, including your father and the Right Honorable Dr. Kennedy Simmons. They stayed together for 15 years. Mistakes were made, to be sure. It wasn't perfect. And then there was Joseph Parry working in a relationship with Prime Minister Denzel Douglas, and mistakes were made again. Fast forward to February 2015. Didn't our Premier learn anything from the mistakes of our leaders who had gone before? At least within 3 years, your father had ensured that government was restored to Nevis with the NIA, and that is what we're very proud of, and which has given us 39 proud years of independence. So mistakes were made, and this gentleman simply marched to town, signed something on the courthouse step. As one person said to me, he loves the court. Why didn't he go inside and make sure that at least it has teeth? And then after sitting at the federal level for 7 years, and he sees an election staring him in the face, he's basically blaming everyone but himself.
Well, it's not just blaming, but it's the consequence of the blame and what we're seeing happening at this time. And so, yes, you would never agree on everything, but you must have some guiding principles by which you operate, and understand that everything will not end up in the court. And so this is where I say that the Charlestown Accord could not have been drafted to benefit the people of Nevis. It could not have been drafted to improve the relationships between the federal and the NIA. And it could not have been drafted to ensure that Nevis received its equitable share, because especially our premier, who would boast about his success in the courts and these sorts of things, would have drafted a number of legislative documents to accomplish various initiatives, like, you know, that he would have wanted. And so everyone would know that if you have an agreement, how do you enforce it? So whether this was done in haste or not, from 2015 until now, the Premier did not recognize that he had a piece of paper, but it was still the Prime Minister who would determine how he wanted to interpret the Charlestown Accord. I mean, where was his effort to try to ensure that whether or not it's CCM or NRP in government in Nevis, the people of Nevis should have felt some sense of relief having sent all three CCM representatives to St. Kitts to help make these types of situations regularize and standardize, whatever the formula that they come up with, so that election after election and budget after budget, the people of Nevis do not have to be going back with their hands open and wondering what we're going to get today or tomorrow. He was in the federal government, part of the federal government, Team Unity government, and he was not able to sit down and negotiate a better financial relationship between Nevis and St. Kitts. So what happens tomorrow if the government changes? Where are we in Nevis with regards to our relationships? We know under NRP government we were able to accomplish quite a lot without the federal input. Times have changed. There are much greater requirements, etc. So we're back at square one. And I can assure you that under NRP-led NIA, one of the first matters to be addressed is to regularize that relationship. Yes, we know what the Constitution said. Yes, we know that there some deviation from that would have been made, whether initiated by Nevis or whomever. And so, based on what works at a particular time, the Constitution would have been used with some flexibility, I guess, to accommodate, a working relationship. But, people speak about constitutional reform. We know that there are some concerns about Nevis having the option to invoke 113, and St. Kitts has no similar option. But when you look at constitutional reform and you know the basis, you know what you're trying to accomplish, I do not see Clause 113 as an issue for constitutional reform. I do see the working and the financial relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis as reason for addressing the provisions of the Constitution. And truth be told, if you look at what the Constitution provides for, and with funds from all the funds being pooled and then you divide it on a certain basis, I'm sure whoever the consultants, independent consultants that the Prime Minister is going to bring in, I don't know if they're engaged yet, but it will be very interesting to see the report that they provide. Because if we are not generating any foreign direct investment, and we're dependent solely on the revenues that are being generated in St. Kitts, what is the purpose of the NIA? And with all of the authority that we have to make the type of policies and ordinances that could help to guide our development, what have we seen done in the NIA with regards to policies and ordinances to guide development and to attract investors? We've seen quite a lot of emphasis on offshore industries. Why is that so? In fact, when we look at the development at Potworks, which is a very, very, very troubling situation, on one hand, there is information that indicates that it's a CBI program, CBI project, and it's supposed to be providing housing for businesses. In another presentation, you would see that it's supposed to be a research and technology park. In a publication put out by the Taiwanese, it is referred to as a housing project. And interestingly, we know that the Taiwanese came here for the Malcolm Gishard Park, and we know that they operated on a certain work permit. Now, some leeway was given because it was a joint relationship between the Taiwanese government and the NIA here, even though there was concern that the work that was being done could have easily been done by our local people, and there was no need to bring in foreign employees. But in the interest of good relations and partnerships, you allow that one to slide. But now the release put out by the Taiwanese government indicates that a Taiwanese construction company, in conjunction with a Hong Kong developer, were able to secure a contract. Now, when and where was that contract published? Did local developers have an opportunity to bid on that contract? What is the working status of the Taiwanese who are working with this Taiwanese company? And it is not that we here in Nevis have any issue because they're Taiwanese, so to speak. What we have an issue with is the lack of transparency by this government. We heard all song and dance about the Penny's Park from day one. There were models that were presented. So why this project now on 10 acres of land? There's nothing at all said about it. And so when you look at our ordinances and the requirement that says projects in the coastal zone ordinarily would require an EIA, why was no EIA done for this project? And so, these questions need to be answered. And we cannot have a development and control ordinance, and development is ongoing, and there's no control in place, there's no regulation, there's no transparency, people are not aware. So if it's a research and technology park, what exactly does that mean? And that's why when you have projects in the coastal zone, we're only 36 square miles. We have very limited coastal areas. And so one of the things that you try to do is to preserve your coastal areas for uses that are coastal dependent. If you want to put a marina, you cannot put it up on the mountain. You can put an office building up in the mountain because that's not dependent on the coast. And so when you manage your resources, it's the same way that you don't put residential housing on agricultural lands. You must identify the various uses, you must have your plans, etc. And so the lack of transparency regarding this project raises a lot of concerns, and again I feel that the Premier has failed the people by having this development going on, knowing that there are people on Nevis, there are workers who I'm certain could have completed that job. And so now you must question. You must question the integrity of the development itself if you did not have to go through the rigors. I know someone who wanted to put a supermarket on less than an acre of land, and they had to do an EIA report. So the Penny's Park had to do an EIA report. So why this project did not do an EIA report, and why one line in the budget that says research and technology park. Now you would imagine a research and technology park coming to Nevis. You would think that's something to be elated about. You think that is something that people would want to know about.
You take the sixth formers down there.
Well, but we have, because remember the time when they put out and said they secured a contract to do a housing development. And so what really is that development? I mean, somebody needs to provide answers. And these are the type of things that would happen. And when answers are not provided, then you have to challenge. And you end up in court. And then you kind of erode investor confidence. Because how many projects under this CCM administration is going to end up in court because the ministers feel as if they can operate and as the technocrats, and they can give approval and take approval and say what requires EIAs and not, etc. And so that project, the coastal zone project, the magnitude of the project based on what I have seen, that is a project that the people of Nevis ought to know about. What can they expect? And so, it's interesting. It's interesting with regards to how do you get the type of information regarding projects such as this that raise a lot of concern, but everybody's tight-lipped. And so do we just sit back and allow it to continue? I mean, if it's really a housing project, how is that going to impact all of the residential properties in the area that have been dependent on the students? If it's a research and technology park, what type of research is going to be going on there? And so there are just too many questions.
Too many questions, not enough answers. And of course, this had to be brought into the sunlight first by a blogger, and then of course the searching minds of the Nevis Reformation Party. Tomorrow, as I said, is the press conference. I'm sure that a journalist will ask about that secretive Potworks project as well. It's 9:25. We've been going for a long time. And so we'll take a break. And then when we come back, we'll move up to 10 o'clock. And of course, we want to hear from you tonight.
But the economy is broken, the government stick. Can the opposition come and take a seat? The debt is high and employment's low. And it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick myself off the floor. Just remember people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, you orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always the first option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Boy, some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. CCM them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
And we're back with your Monday night program, Your Voice with the NRP. Special guest tonight, leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. And Janice, while we were going through the malaise in the month of March, the back and forth, I kept wondering when would our government leaders begin to talk about the bread and butter issues affecting our people. Not even the Minister of Foreign Affairs have I heard address the matter with the European Union and our CIP program. No one had been talking about the cost of fuel, $17, $18 plus on Nevis, less than $5 in Barbados. No one was talking about lots of other issues which impact us here. It was exciting to hear the Prime Minister at the business end of his presentation begin to talk about the blue-green economy, something which you have been pushing for a while. And of course, yourself and your candidates have been talking about help needed to ease the cost of living in Nevis and by extension St. Kitts.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I've looked at what is happening in the country, and certainly we can see where St. Kitts is moving to a more sustainable development approach, quite contrasting to what is happening in Nevis. And the blue-green economy, if he spoke about the blue economy, he didn't get to
touch the green part.
he didn't touch the green part. But there are a number of things that are being done that would look at the green part. But the blue economy is really looking at our ocean resources and maximizing the socioeconomic benefits as much as we can. And when we look at the blue economy, we would want to be able to protect the marine environment. We here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we depend quite heavily on the marine environment for transportation, tourism, recreation, biodiversity, a number of different uses. And so we would want to be able to ensure that whatever we do has a beneficial or positive impact. And so when you look at exploring the blue economy, there are certain things that you must do on land as well to protect the marine environment. I know one area that we ought to be seriously concerned about is our landfill. We look at the amount of waste that is going there, day after day, and it must be addressed. Now, one of the areas that we can look at, I know that at one time there was a waste to energy program that was being considered under the CCM government. What happened to that? It was the Alpha Omni project, and that just disappeared and nothing to show for it. But when we look at, for example, the use of plastics, plastic bottles, we know that a lot of these end up in the ocean, they impact the marine life. Now, with $400 million, we could have invested in the necessary equipment to convert your plastics into reusable material, different formats. We can look at tires. There are machines that you can use to create pellets out of the tires, and you can then reuse those pellets in different recreational spaces and that sort of thing. So the blue economy, you protect the marine environment, you minimize the amount of pollution, because that is one of the major ways in which you protect it. And so you prepare your grant proposals understanding that this project that I'm doing, even though it may be based on the land, it goes a long way in terms of preventing these pollutants from getting into the ocean. And so investing in the necessary equipment that would help you to reduce the impact on the landfill on one hand, but then also protects the marine environment, because many of us depend on the oceans for seafood, and so we want to protect that. And so even when we look at, folks cleaning alongside the road, they would clean, but then you see a lot of bottles there. Generate an opportunity for people to bring those bottles to the landfill, have a facility so that you can protect the environment, but at the same time create job opportunities. We look at a number of situations. For example, we have our erosion along the northwest coast, and there are marine structures that you can create which can help to protect the shoreline from erosion, but also create employment opportunities while you're constructing those, and then it enhances the area for your fishery, and so you can have more fishing, etc. When you look at the blue economy, right now our fishers are struggling. The price of gas has gone up,
and
the price of fish has gone up, and so you see when you don't really manage. Now the interesting thing is, and I've done quite a bit, the price of gas in sink is for fishers. It's cheaper than they have a special pump that they can go to and get their gas at a cheaper price. In fact, some of the boat operators from Nevis will go over to Sinkers, but then it's a matter of convenience, it's not, So, of the $400 million, what could we have done? We spoke about, food security, talk about the fishing industry. What could we have done to enhance the fishing sector? We have plans that speak to like fishing priority areas, but nothing has been done with regard to, when I say nothing has been done, in a meaningful way, to help the fishers to catch more fish. I must mention the Gallows Fisheries complex that this government just abandoned, already approved, ready to go, and that is where you would create even more employment opportunities, because you then look at the value added. So you're not just looking at the fishers, catching the fish, but then you're using, for example, the fish guts as fertilizer. You're making fish patties. You're making fish sticks. You're getting a lot more value from the fish. But these opportunities must be provided. Now we know in Indian Castle, for example, the fishers suffer a lot from the sargassum. We know that there is a project in Antigua that deals with sargassum, and how do you tap into that program where you can again employ, create opportunities for people to go out and collect and ship it off if you need to. So looking at some of the regional projects that are ongoing in the blue economy, especially, it's some of it we can create here locally, some of it we can tap into what is already being done on a regional level. And so the focus has to be on creating employment opportunities, and you create employment opportunities in a manner that would be protective of the marine environment. One of the things we know is that our seagrass beds and our reefs, they suffer a lot from unpaved roads. You get a lot of sediment going into the ocean, and so even having a program where you're going to be stabilizing a number of these roads that lead to guts and into the ocean, you may not see that as part of the blue economy, but indeed it is, because you're stabilizing the roads to prevent all of this sediment and soil from getting into the marine environment. And so it's that ability to make the connection between the type of projects that you need to get funding for and connect it to the blue economy. Now we spoke about transport, cruise industry, but also the ship registry. like I mentioned, that is a big part. Almost, 90% of the material that we import comes via ships, and so our infrastructure needs to be intact. When we look at, for example, the distribution centers on Nevis, we have the port over at Long Point. So what are the options, or what are the plans to expand? We have that one port. Is that adequate based on the way that the island is being developed? And so looking at how we can explore the socioeconomic benefits from the ocean goes a long way. Of course, in some places they look at desalination plants. You need to have a steady water supply. We look at climate change. One of the impacts has to do with excessive periods of droughts, and so your groundwater is not going to be replenished. And so what is being put in place with regards to desalination plants? The ocean is bountiful. I hate to say it, but in St. Kitts they put in a desalination plant. And so when you look at the contrast, you develop a program. If you're looking at fisheries, you must do research to know which fish stock you're trying to enhance. And so you have young people, scientists, they want to be able to do some research. All of that feeds into the fact that you're trying to protect the marine environment, you're trying to enhance your food security, and you create jobs in that area. Now, because we're looking at a blue-green economy, your focus would be on providing training opportunities. I was pleased to hear the Prime Minister mention in his address that they would be providing training opportunities and assistance to persons who want to develop businesses in this area. And so making those connections are quite important. I think based on the cost of fuel, we see what's happening. The travel between the various islands, and we see even between St. Kitts and Nevis how that sector has really blossomed. You have a number of but for crying out loud, at least we see the water taxis operating. Complete that project. A number of persons coming through this area. We're promoting marine transportation. At least complete a project so we can say, okay, this is, showing our level of respect and appreciation for the people who are utilizing this area. And so when we look at how we would want to move forward, because our marine area is so large and we can do so much in terms of research and developing new products, then it really takes us a lot farther. And as we look at, for example, if I go back to the plastic bottles that end up in the ocean, there's a facility in St. Kitts that accepts the plastic bottles, but it's very difficult to transport. They're quite voluminous and take up a lot of space. And so understanding that we cannot continue to just carry material to the landfill and just pile it on. We must find ways in order to make our use more sustainable. And these are the things that we would want to look at and create the employment opportunities around the initiatives that would also protect the environment at the same time in your marine environment.
Now, one of the things the Premier said going all the way back to 2020 when the COVID pandemic started was that, and he was not alone in this was said by leaders all across the Caribbean, that at the end of it, we're going to be judged by the level at which we have provided food security, because we know with the pandemic, travel was not the same, shipping was not the same, etc. And God knows the government has tried. Randy Elliott and his people at the Agriculture Department have tried. They've had, on many occasions, offered seedlings and seeds. I personally benefited the last time, started my backyard garden, and there were a number of people in the line. Now, we just came out of the agricultural exhibition, a 2-day affair. Do you get a sense that we're making strides in that area? Food security? Significant strides.
I don't think that we are making the strides that we ought to. Again, I have to go back to the $400 million, because we have been hearing our livestock farmers complaining about stray dogs and how they attack the animals. And what has been done to help those farmers to rear their livestock. I understand that meat had to be imported.
Well, that's been happening for years. If I remember correctly, either 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of meat came in from neighboring Statia for the agricultural exhibition.
Right. So if we have food security as a priority, you would imagine over the last 2 years, I mean, if we have the funds to import meat from another country, that money is going to be circulating in that economy. Why couldn't we say, well, we really want to advance our agricultural activities, and so let us try to assist our farmers, invest that money in our farmers. So stray dogs is really an issue. The monkeys are also an issue. What have we done in any meaningful way to assist the farmers who are growing their crops, and before they can reap the harvest, the monkeys have destroyed them?
You didn't mention the roaming sheep. It's a standing joke between myself and the people who work at the abattoir. I would go there to buy mutton, and they would say, we don't have any, maybe in another week or two. And I would say, and there's so many sheep roaming on our streets, causing traffic accidents. And they would say, well, bring 2 when you come next time. That's an issue which we have not looked at over the years. And reading about the meat which came in from Statia, some of the animals there were actually taken by government because they were straying. And some of that meat comes to Nevis. They have a program in which they control marauding animals, which at the end of it can be turned into money for the government.
Well, you see, whatever we do, it's you must tie it back into people. And so you set up a program. We're serious about food security. We're serious about livestock farming. We're serious about crop production. What are the issues? I mean, it's no secret what is really frustrating a lot of farmers. But we're not seeing anything being done. Now, incidentally, a farmer would have called me and had a very serious complaint that he has to pay for his water to irrigate his crops. He has to pay for lease for where he's farming. And then he was concerned that he get to the agricultural fair and the government produced crop is being sold at a reduced price, and so it's very challenging for the farmers to make a profit, make it worth their while. And so I know that there's some farming going on at Indian Castle by the government, but you see, you really must look at what you're trying to accomplish, and if there's no assistance to deal with a lot of these pests and etc., then we're not going to really move forward in any meaningful way, because this is as long as we've been talking about food security, we talk about the cost, the increased cost of bringing food here. Well, if we have $10 to spend, invested in our people here, so that they can produce and that money can circulate in the economy. And so, if the intention is just to have a fair and all of this these items, then you don't care if you have to buy the meat from station. You got to, bring in the crops. So and that should not be the way that it operates. And so for food security, you definitely we look at mango, and as people say, mango knocking dog.
Mm-hmm.
But then we go to the supermarket and we have Dole mango chunks, and we don't see an issue with that. And so it has to be where you set out an agricultural plan, and you know particularly what plants you want to harvest. Now, if we look at cannabis, there was a lot of football with cannabis and whether or not we could grow, whether or not it's a drug, But there's something called repurposing,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the different use. And one of the things that we have to do more of is to look at what exists elsewhere and try to tap into that market. For example, we know that St. Vincent produces cannabis, it was, and has a market that it exports to. And so maybe sometimes it's not necessarily that you are growing the cannabis here for people here to smoke it. Again, you're creating employment opportunities, and so you create your 100-acre tract of and employ the necessary amount of persons to grow the crop, and then you bag it and you export it, and you benefit. What you're trying to do is to provide an opportunity for people to work, and you generate some money. So sometimes even you may look at it and say, well, I'm not making a whole lot of money out of this, but to the extent that you can employ people and you can pay them, then if that is your focus, then it would be successful, because you're able to give somebody a payday, and that is what people really want. So sometimes it's not all about making this huge profit. It's really about providing opportunities for your people to work, and these are things that we look at when we talk about food security, and we look at from the marine sector. How do we help the fishers? The same boats and one engine, and they can't go very far, and how do we help them to build that industry? We don't have much infrastructure in place to assist the fishers.
Mm-hmm.
The docks are broken, and so
we're just chugging along.
Yeah, I would say this CCM government is really about maintaining the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is how I met it, and this is how I'm going to leave it. There is no major, as we say, a transformational type of development that you would want to see.
Well, the word transformational is associated with the NRP, not the CCM.
Well, they transform roads by repairing them. That they call that transformational.
Mm-hmm.
But we know what transformational
Real change.
will change.
Now we've got only 7 minutes, so we won't take a break. We're going to go all the way up to the top of the hour. Now, the most exciting moment of the PLP's convention was when the Prime Minister said, money coming. People were dancing in the aisles. But clearly, that was an attempt to ease the squeeze, basically, to ease the pain that we're feeling. But what other things can, say, a Nevis Island administration do to make life a little bit more livable for the people in Nevis? People are crying out. The costs are escalating on the supermarket shelves. The gasoline makes you wonder sometime if there's a hole in your gasoline tank. People are feeling the pinch.
People are feeling the pinch. It's real. I find it interesting that we speak about double salaries. We speak about increasing salaries, but I know that there are a number of persons who are unemployed, and they're not getting a double salary. They have no salary to be increased, and I really feel that programs need to be developed to assist those people, because we've really gone through, with the pandemic and so many persons. I mean, I know here in Nevis, a number of hotels that have been closed, and that was really the bread and butter for a large number of people. And so while I can say yes, we have complained about low salaries for teachers, nurses, etc., and they really deserve more. I don't see where an NRP government would take $400 million and bury it in roads and walls, etc., and you have people who have not been employed for going on 2 years, if not more, and you can't share sympathy with them that they have bills to pay, they have the children to take to school. And so certainly a $25 tax increase on your water bill is not something that NRP would endorse, support. Again, this is a solid waste bill. What are we doing at the landfill to help to minimize those costs? And so it's just a matter of, we provide services, and so we'll tax you to pay for it. But as a government, you must put the necessary infrastructure in place so that at the end of the day you can make life easier for people, not increase a tax each time you need to cover the cost of your cover your operational costs. And so definitely social programs have to be looked at a lot more closely to ensure that we're not taxing our people to death.
Tax and spend.
And so looking at the issues and hearing the concerns and the programs that we have in our schools. One program that I'm particularly interested in, I've been following it, is the universal healthcare program. We know that the cost of medical care is expensive. A lot of people can't afford it, and so where we are right now, we're really spending a lot of money in the bricks and mortar, not in that other way, but in trying to build this big fancy hospital, and then the cost of services, you can imagine is going to be increased. But I've said before, the existing Alexandria Hospital, I would have preferred to see it outfitted with the necessary equipment that we need to save lives, rather than trying to build a wing which is 2-3 times larger than the existing hospital, and then we still have to be the challenge of having to travel to St. Kitts for healthcare and that sort of thing. So really, with $400 million, there are many ways that we could impact the lives of the people, to ensure that they understand that the government is there to assist them, to help make their lives better, and really you respond to the needs of the people. It's not a matter where you do what you think or you do what you want to do, but you take the time to listen to the people and respond to their most pressing needs, in the best way that you can.
Well, Director has indicated we've got 3 minutes. Use that time to address any other matter that you would like, and to tell us about the plans for the NRP in the immediate future. School holidays are coming up. Easter weekend is coming up. And we'll be out of the month of March and into the month of April.
Well, there are lots of things going on. We know that we're going to be having interprimary coming up in April, and again, what did we do with the $400 million? You go to the Mundo track, and it's just not very comfortable, and it would be interesting to see how and when we can get all of these second phases of all these projects completed.
People are counting. There's 7 uncompleted projects in Nevis. I heard that on a talk show today.
Well, I didn't count them, but I know that there are
several.
There are many. Yes. So we have interprimary coming up. Now we have been looking. We have been paying attention to what's going on. Of course, over on St. Kitts, and there's talk about the possibility of a federal election and when that may occur. It's really a challenge for the people in St. Kitts and Nevis to have to be thinking about another election.
It's called muddying the waters. The hope is that they'll go to a federal election first, that the CCM would be re-elected, while they're dangling their re-election in the air and say, come and join me in a coalition. We are the kingmakers, and put off the election which is tearing them on the face in Nevis and on which they're feeling great pressure.
Well,
2 minutes, our director tells us.
What I would say is that I do not see where CCM has a good hand to play at this time. I think that they would have gained the confidence of people when they went down to St. Kitts, and we can see the result of them being in St. Kitts. They have managed to not utilize the 3 seats that they have. They indicate that they could form the majority with PAM having 4 seats and they're having 3. But they have been there for how long, and they have not done anything. And so they will have to get a failing grade for their performance in St. Kitts. When the double salary was issued, the Premier said, oh, well, we are part of the federal government, and so we take credit for that as well. Well, why can't you take credit for ensuring that we get Nevis' fair share? So I don't think they can come to the people of Nevis and say that they would have been successful in being at the federal government. And certainly when it comes to their performance in Nevis, it has really been a relationship of neglect. The concerns of people have not been addressed, and so we are confident that we're looking, we're seeing what's going on. We know that if a federal election has to come early, we have to have our plans in place, and so these are some of the things that we will be looking at over the next couple of days and weeks. But we're quite mindful. We're not the loudest on the platform, but we're definitely very strategic and very focused, and understand that whatever we do is for the best interest of the people. Said Nevis first, we must make Nevis nice again.
Definitely. The NRP will make Nevis nice again. That's our show for Monday, March 28th.
I say we tired, man, say keep the momentum. From Mr. Premier where we get the energy from. I say we tired, time to protect the poor. Just remember people matter more.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.
With all the power from the tower.